Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class. Today we're going to be covering the origins of psychopathology. We'll also be talking about the etiology of psychopathology. We're going to explore the roots of mental illness and how society has progressed in diagnosing and treating psychological disorders. Here we've got a historical view of psychopathology, so you can see the timeline here. And we're going to move through each phase of this timeline in the course today. So psychopathology is currently defined as the scientific study of psychological disorders. The origins of this field, however, are anything but scientific. From witchcraft and the cosmos to biology and the scientific method, psychopathology, or the study of abnormal behavior, has greatly evolved over time. In earlier times, dating back to the 16th century, many believed that abnormal behavior and mental illness was largely a result of witchcraft or the supernatural. History observed a spike in reported cases of mental illness in the late Middle Ages, which was largely documented through accusations of witchcraft. These claims of witchcraft or the supernatural were used to explain the unexplainable or to label the unidentified. Similar circumstances were the case when abnormal behavior was correlated to the supernatural. The rise of the supernatural model was rooted in beliefs that behavior, thinking, and emotions could be influenced by the environment or other factors outside the human body. During these earlier years, before psychiatry was defined as a distinct medical discipline, which wouldn't happen until sometime in the 19th century, humans drew conclusions about the unexplainable from supernatural or religious-based ideas. As the origins of the field developed from darker times, so too did the etiology. Etiology is defined as the cause or source of a disorder. Over history, the field of psychopathology emerged from a past cloaked in mystery. The causes of psychological disorders or mental illnesses have also had a shadowy past. For a time, it was believed that abnormal behaviors and mental illness were the work of demons or signs of witchcraft. Other such supernatural causes of mental illness or hysteria were thought to be induced by the moon or the stars, or evil forms and spirits that challenged current Christian beliefs. Over time, as philosophers considered that individuals presenting mental illnesses who had confessed to witchcraft usually only did so because of the horrifying cruelty of torture. Realizing that under these circumstances, the root cause of the symptoms were not actually from witchcraft, philosophers considered that the abnormal behavior and mental distress could be influenced through treatments such as rest, a healthy diet, and a happy environment. These insights led to the continued evolution of the etiology of psychopathology. Time progressed and psychiatry became a distinct medical discipline in the 19th century. Much of psychiatry functioned as a means of observing historical events through a lens of mental illness. Abnormal behaviors and mental illness began to be demystified as definitions to such behaviors became defined and measurable. Once the work of witchcraft and the devil, now psychological disorders are being characterized by the observance of a psychological dysfunction, distress, and the manifestation of an atypical response presenting in an individual. Philosophers such as Hippocrates and Galen explored such abnormalities and began to denote that they may be influenced by genetics, brain pathology, and/or brain trauma from an injury. From this assumption, Hippocrates established the humoral theory, which identified 4 bodily fluids that supported normal brain function. These fluids included blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm. From the humoral theory, philosophers believed that etiology of mental distress was rooted in a lack or an overabundance of a humor, or one of these fluids in the body. This theory was one of the earliest examples that linked psychological disorders with physiological imbalances in the body, or imbalances in brain chemistry. As more was learned about the biological functioning of the human body through anatomy and physiology, it became apparent that some individuals presented symptoms for which a physical or a medical causation could not be identified. These somatic symptom disorders included things like paralysis, blindness, deafness, feelings of weakness, shortness of breath, and unidentified pain. The quest to understand these unidentifiable causes of distress further pushed the evolution of psychology. many theories were developed to continue to understand mental illness and unusual behaviors. The psychoanalytical theory drew from the development and structure of an individual's personality. It explored the layers of the mind of the personality. Over the course of personality development, things could go incorrectly and present as psychological disorders. This theory implied that people developed over time, and if assembled incorrectly, mental disorders could become the result. This perspective leans toward the idea that underlying issues in development, such as unconscious or unresolved conflicts, may be the root cause of abnormal behavior. Building on the foundation of this, the humanistic theory placed focus on the self. Not only was the mind made of delicate layers that, if disrupted, cause disorder, it also possessed the power to be self-aware and to grow. This approach considered how interpersonal relationships could also influence behavior, mental health, and most importantly, growth beyond these limiting factors of the psychoanalytical theory. These models helped progress the evolution of the field of psychopathology and furthered the understanding of psychological disorders. In an ever-changing world and with the progression of sound science, the study of abnormal behavior continued to blossom. The behavior model, or the social learning model, launched the field forward and inspired the creation of systematic measures and procedures that included the scientific method. The perspective of this school of thought was founded in the idea that behavior can be learned and controlled by an individual's surrounding environment. The field was leaving behind the mystic past and being catapulted into a future of sound science. Through the lens of behaviorism, researchers sought to make accurate predictions about behavior and to influence or control behaviors. The model was viewed as an experimental sector of natural science. You heard me right, natural science. No longer were the days of superstition and supernatural phenomenon. Oddities of behavior were becoming measurable and predictable. It was noted that illness, both mental and bodily, stem from a deviation from a largely accepted norm. A greater understanding of deviations from normalcy opened a window to assess and categorize psychological disorders, making them more predictable and easier to understand. It is also key that these norms be clearly defined and not used subjectively. To maintain consistent and unbiased definitions of a norm, researchers must avoid subjective judgment by clearly defining the norm in terms of ethical, legal, and psychosocial standards. These models of the past bring us to present-day psychopathology, or abnormal psychology. Today's researchers and psychologists use an integrative approach in their investigation of psychological disorders. They combine biological, psychological, and sociocultural influences. The field of psychopathology over the last 20 years has bloomed with new insight and combinations of theories from the past. No one approach has proved to be substantially more successful than the other. It turns out that multidimensional and integrative approaches are what fuel the continued expansion of the field. A biopsychosocial approach or perspective outlines that although an individual may be genetically or biologically predispositioned for a specific disorder, the development and intensity of manifestation of that disorder is largely manipulated by the stressors and the environment that the individual is exposed to. Contributions from multiple fields of psychology are improving and expanding psychopathology. Influences from natural sciences, cognitive sciences, behavioral sciences, and neurosciences help researchers paint a larger picture of the human mind and psychological disorders that can form within it. In psychopathology today, it is understood that biological, behavioral, cognitive, emotional, and social influences are never an exclusive contributing factor in regard to psychological disorders. It's accepted that these variables are in constant interaction as the brain and body are at work. From a fear response of the unknown to a systematic organization of symptoms and disorders, psychopathology has carved out a permanent place for itself throughout history and into the future. From a dark past, present-day scientist practitioners can approach psychological disorders from a multidimensional, integrative perspective. They are able to measure and treat symptoms with tested and proven methods. No longer are the days of fear from witchcraft and persecution. Individuals coping with mental illness and psychological distress can rely on professionals to support them and assess and treat the symptoms they are presenting. That's not to say that there is not room for continued growth, but the field has come a long way from its distant and dark beginning. The future of psychopathology is expansive and ever-growing. Using an integrative approach, researchers are able to approach a topic with a broad scope of reference across multiple disciplines to examine and understand the case at hand. Using this approach, they can incorporate and review biological, psychological, and social factors that may be influencing an individual's mental state. Using the scientific method in addition to a multidimensional approach provides researchers the opportunity to work as scientist practitioners. Scientist practitioners are on the edge of progression as they seek out and devour the most up-to-date information from professionals across multiple disciplines of psychology. These individuals also actively test and evaluate their own theories, treatments, and research. Often they conduct their own research in addition to using the latest technology and treatments from other professionals in the field. Through the power of science, psychopathology will continue to grow. From this expansion, a better understanding of psychological disorders will continue to develop. Looking at disorders through multiple lenses helps paint a full picture of a disorder and how it might be manifesting. Considering how genetics, experiences, relationships, emotions, and body chemistry influence an individual's mental health, personalized treatments can be established. Disorders have been categorized, but as the experience of the individual is considered in layers, the treatment from person to person might be slightly different for people presenting with the same disorder. As more information continues to be collected, treatments can improve and overall quality of life for those coping with psychological disorders can vastly improve. The outlook for individuals presenting symptoms of psychological disorders is much brighter than it was for those of our past ancestors who faced accusations of witchcraft and feared torture. However, even in more recent years, unjust treatment in clinical settings has been evident. Psychopathology and treatment plans are nowhere near perfect and ideal, but the horizon is bright, and the possibilities for growth, expansion, and improvement are vast when integrative, multidimensional, and scientific progress is made. If you guys have any questions, feel free to meet with me after class, and I will see you in next week's lecture. Have a great day.